It's good to see all of you. So, first and foremost, give it up for your next representatives, Mary Barzee Flores, Debbie Mercasel Powell, and from the U, Donna Shalala, a leader that we are going to send back to the United States Senate, my friend, Bill Nelson. And give it up for an outstanding mayor, one of the most inspiring, gifted candidates that are running this year, the next governor of the next great state of Florida, Andrew Gillum. Give it up. So let me make a confession. I love you back. But you knew that. That wasn't a confession. Now, there are a lot of good reasons to come to Miami. It's starting to get a little cooler back in D.C. Leaves are falling and the wind's getting a little brisker. And, you know, around this time of year, you start thinking, I wouldn't mind being in Miami. You got the ocean. You've got really good Cuban sandwiches. You've got very nice-looking people. So there are a lot of good reasons to come to Miami. You know, it's okay. You know, you're right. Sorry. Don't curse in front of kids. Come on. Don't do that in front of kids. Come on. So, we're okay. You know what? This is what I look forward to, is having a few hecklers to get me back in the mood. You know, it's like I enjoy that. You always got to have a few in order to know that you're on the campaign trail. So these are all the reasons I've come down to Miami. But the real reason I came down to Miami, because this Tuesday might be the most important election of our lifetimes. Politicians will always say that, but this time it's actually true. The stakes really are that high. The consequences of any of us staying home really are more dangerous. Because America's at a crossroads. The health care of millions. Hold on a second. Sir. Hold on a second. Listen, here's the deal. If you support the other candidates, then you should go support the other candidates. Don't be here. One of the things I never understood was why, if you're supporting the other guy, you come to my rally. Go to their rally. Go talk about what you're for. Don't come hollering here. Where was I? So America's at a crossroads. The health care of millions is on the ballot. Making sure working families get a fair shake is on the ballot. But maybe most of all, the character of our country is on the ballot. In the closing weeks of this election, we have seen repeated attempts to divide us with rhetoric designed to make us angry and make us fearful. That's designed to exploit our history of racial and ethnic and religious division that pits us against one another, to make us believe that order will somehow be restored if it just weren't for those folks who don't look like we look, or don't love like we love, or pray like we do. So, you know what? It's an old playbook. It's one that the powerful and the privileged turn to whenever control starts slipping away. They'll get folks riled up just to protect their power and their privilege, even when it hurts the country, even when it puts people at risk. It's as cynical as politics gets. But in 4 days, Florida, you can reject that kind of politics. In 4 days, you can be a check on that kind of behavior. In 4 days, you can choose a bigger, more prosperous, more generous vision of America. An America where love and hope conquer hate. An America where we, the people, whatever we look like, whoever we love, however we choose to pray, however our ancestors came here, we can come together to shape our country's course. That's what Andrew Gillum stands for. That's what Bill Nelson stands for. I'm hoping that's what you stand for. That's what you can do when you vote on Tuesday. And then we've been at this crossroads. We've been at crossroads like this before. And each time we made the right choice, not by sitting back, not by waiting for history to happen to us, but by marching and by mobilizing and by organizing and by voting to make history happen. That's how we abolished slavery in this country. That's how we overcame a Great Depression. That's how we won women's rights and workers' rights and civil rights, LGBT rights and immigrants' rights. That's what made the story of America a story of progress. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. But progress never comes without a fight. For every 2 steps of progressive change, we often take 1 step back in conservative retrenchment. Every time we start pulling ourselves closer to our founding ideals, that all of us are created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. every time we start including more people in that promise, some folks start pushing back. The status quo pushes back. You win the right to make a union, SEIU. But then somebody comes around and tries to bust your union. You win a higher minimum wage. Then Congress decides we won't raise the minimum wage for a decade. You win the right to vote. They try to make it hard for you to vote. Making this country better has never been easy. I love you too, but this is serious. 10 years ago, I was campaigning for president. You know, I was in game shape back then. That's why I didn't lose my voice. So I could talk all the time. Now I'm not used to talking this much. But 10 years ago, we had just gone through a period of conservative retrenchment. Republicans had been cutting taxes for the rich. They'd been cutting rules for big banks and for polluters. We had just gotten hit with the worst financial crisis in our lifetimes. And guess what? The Democrats had to come and clean up. Bill remembers because he was there. And so with the help of Democrats like Bill Nelson, we got the economy growing again. We covered another 20 million people with health care. We doubled the amount of clean energy we generate. We put tougher rules on banks and credit card companies. We cut our deficits by more than half, in part by making sure the wealthiest paid their fair share of taxes. So by the time I left office, wages were rising, the uninsured rate was falling, the economy was growing, and by the way, that growth has just kept on going. You know, I do have to make this point because right now Republicans are all, look, the economy is so good. Where do you think that started? When did that start? They're talking about how, oh, look, how many jobs have we created? The economy created more jobs in the last 21 months that I was in office than it did in the 20 months after I left office. And at the time, they were saying how terrible the economy was. Anyway, we'll get to that. That's what a progressive agenda did. Now, we didn't get everything we wanted to do. You couldn't reverse 40-year economic trends in only 8 years. You couldn't bring all the jobs back that had moved overseas. You couldn't eliminate all the inequality that had built up, especially not after Republicans took over Congress and blocked everything that Bill and I and others tried to do. But now Republicans have been in control for 2 years, everything in Washington, White House, House, Senate. They've won governorships, including here in Florida. What have they done with that power? No, it's not true they haven't done nothing. That's not true. They cut taxes for the rich just like they did the last time. They stripped out rules to protect our air and water, just like they did the last time. They ran up the deficit, just like the last time. Just like the last time. And by the way, they actually know none of this is popular, which is part of the reason why, just like the last time, they're actively trying to disenfranchise voters to keep them from voting. They're also resorting to the same tactic that they did the last time, which is to try to scare folks with whatever boogeyman or divisive social issues they can come up with, just like they did the last time. Let's take a look at what they've been up to. They promised to take on corruption. Instead, they have racked up enough indictments to field a football team. You know, I didn't have anybody in my administration get indicted. I mean, I just thought that's how you're supposed to do things. They pledged to fight for the little guy. Instead, they doled out $1.5 trillion in tax cuts aimed at billionaires and corporations. Don't boo. Vote. Let me tell you something. Republicans can't hear you boo, but they can hear you vote. So they did not even pretend to pay for these tax cuts. And of course, deficits shot up. That's what happened. Except just 2 weeks ago, the Republican leader in Congress said, you know, now that we've gotten our tax cuts passed, we're very disturbed with the deficit. We need to bring them down. We're going to have to cut programs like Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. Hey, don't take my word for it. Look it up. That's what he said. In fact, look up anything I say today, because I promise you, I believe in a fact-based campaign. The point is that cutting Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid to pay for tax cuts for folks like Rick Scott does not sound like fighting for a little guy to me. You want somebody actually, I think that, hold on a second. There's an interesting observation I want to make. Why is it that, hold on. Why is it that the folks that won the last election are so mad all the time? It's an interesting question. I mean, like when I won the presidency, at least my side felt pretty good. You know, I don't know why. It tells you something interesting. That even the folks who are in charge are still mad. Because they're getting ginned up to be mad. That's the mindset. So, you want somebody who's actually going to work for working people? Andrew Gillum, somebody who's going to work for working people. Andrew's mom is right here. That's where he got his good looks from. Andrew was raised by a construction worker, a school bus driver. Had to work his way up the hard way to become mayor of Tallahassee. He knows the promise of this country, so he's not going to work. He's not going to work for people who had it handed to him. He's going to work for the people who had to work their way up, just like his parents did, to look after. their families. Andrew has lived the American dream. And if you give him your vote, he will fight to make sure every child in Florida has the same chance that this state and this country gave him. Let's talk about health care for a second. 8 years ago, Democrats passed the Affordable Care Act. That law helps cover almost 1.6 million people just here in Florida. That law made it illegal for the first time for insurers to discriminate against folks who had a pre-existing condition. And by the way, for the young people here, you may not think about pre-existing conditions, but when you get to be 57, because insurance companies, they could categorize all kinds of things as pre-existing conditions. If you had asthma, you might not get insurance or it'd be really expensive. If you had cancer, they might not give you insurance. Just being a woman was considered a pre-existing condition because they would charge women more than men for insurance, which, when you think about it, makes absolutely no sense, because the condition women have is the power to give birth to us. And it seems to me you wouldn't want to charge somebody more for bringing us into the world. That's just my opinion. So we put in a law that said, no, you got to charge women the same as men. You can't discriminate based on pre-existing conditions. And okay, that's great. So, and by the way, on that vote, not a single Republican joined us. Not one. Zero. Nada. Zilch. None. Goose egg. None. None of them supported us. Now suddenly it's election season, and what happens? You've got Republicans out there saying, oh, well, we will protect pre-existing conditions. Trust us. Let's look at the record. Andrew's opponent was in Congress and voted to sabotage or repeal the ACA and protections for people with pre-existing conditions every chance he got. Bill's opponent, Rick Scott, don't boo, vote. So Bill's opponent is literally suing the government to overturn pre-existing protections as we speak. When I was president, Republicans voted more than a dozen times to get rid of protections for people with pre-existing conditions. Last year, they fell one vote short. One vote. If they win this Tuesday, they'll finally succeed. If they keep control of Congress, you better believe they're coming after your health care. Florida, we can't let Rick Scott become the deciding vote that guts your pre-existing conditions protections. In all of his time in office, Rick Scott could have expanded Medicaid and covered 800,000 more Floridians with health care. 800,000. Those are families. Rick DeSantis wouldn't even try. So if you want change, Andrew Gillum will expand Medicaid coverage. If you vote for him and you vote for a Democratic state legislature to help him, your vote could give 800,000 Floridians just like that the security of health care coverage. Democrats aren't going to let Republicans gut your pre-existing conditions protections. Democrats aren't going to let Republicans gut your Medicare to pay for their tax cuts. They're going to protect your care, period. But here's the main point I want to make, Florida. If Republicans thought their tax cut for billionaires was popular, they'd be campaigning on it, right? You don't hear a peep out of them. This was their main legislative accomplishment in Congress. They have not mentioned it in a single ad. If Republicans thought their endless votes to sabotage or take away your health care was popular, that's what they'd be campaigning on. You don't hear a peep from them about that. In fact, right at election time, suddenly Republicans are saying they're going to protect your pre-existing conditions when they've literally been doing the opposite. That's some kind of gall. That's some kind of chutzpah. Let's call it what it is. It's a lie. They're lying to you. A former Republican Congressman, David Jolly, just cast his vote. He voted for Andrew Gillum. He said, the reason's simple, is because I've served with Ron DeSantis. That should tell you something. Let me tell you, somebody who had served with me in my party voted for the other guy, I'd feel bad. I don't imagine Congressman Jolly and Mayor Gillum agree on a lot, but maybe they, just like all of us, agree that there's some things bigger than politics. And that's on the ballot right now. What kind of politics do we want? Do we want a politics where people are yelling at each other and making lewd gestures in front of the children? Can't do that in front of mamas. Look, throughout human history, politicians have made promises that turned out to be harder than they expected, and so they pump up the good things that they did. They downplay the stuff that didn't work out. They try to put a positive. We're okay. They try to put a positive spin on things. It's not just politicians, by the way, that do that. Y'all do that too. You know, sometimes, Andrew, maybe this doesn't happen with you and your wife, but sometimes I'm at home and I'm doing the dishes. I say, hey, hon, look, I did the dishes. Michelle says, that's the first time in a month you've done dishes. Don't brag about it. I'm putting a positive spin on things. Then she asked me, what'd you do wrong? Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing the dishes. We all try to put a positive spin on things. But what we have not seen the way we're seeing right now is politicians just blatantly, repeatedly, boldly, shamelessly lying, just making stuff up. That's what they're doing right now all the time. And by the way, it's not the first time. They do this every election cycle. Try to terrify folks. And then the election comes and problem suddenly magically vanishes. You never hear about it again. In 2010, they said that Bill and I, we were setting up death panels to kill your grandma. Remember that? In 2014, they said, Ebola's going to kill all of us. Shut the borders. In 2016, it was Hillary's emails. They were all wound up about that. And the mainstream press picked up on it. This is terrible. This is a breach of security. You know they don't care about that, because if they did, they'd be worrying about the current president talking on his cell phone while the Chinese are listening in. They didn't care about it. They said it to get folks angry and ginned up. Now in 2018, they're telling you the existential threat to America is a bunch of poor refugees 1,000 miles away. They're even taking our brave troops away from their families for a political stunt at the border. And the men and women of our military deserve better than that. So there's just constant fear-mongering to distract from the record. Now the administration suddenly says we're doubling down on an outdated Cuba policy, which all that does is hurt families and entrepreneurs who are trying to open up the Cuban economy. We need to get back to policies that support the Cuban people, make their lives better. That's change. That's what Bill believes in. That's what Andrew believes in. The point is, Florida. They make stuff up, but here's also the problem is too often we fall for it. Too often we fall for the distraction. You know, y'all remember Peanuts, right? Maybe some of you too young. Charlie Brown and Lucy with the football. And she'd say, go ahead, I'm holding it, you can kick it. And Charlie Brown would say, okay, and then she'd pull the ball away and he'd fall on his back. But he kept on doing it every time. Don't be Charlie Brown. Don't fall for the okey doke. Don't be bamboozled. Don't be hoodwinked. Because when you get distracted, while you're distracted with all this stuff they're making up, they're also robbing you blind. They'll be like, look, over there. And then they're giving tax cuts to billionaires. Look, over there. Then they're letting polluters poison your air and water. They will absolutely take health care away from millions the first chance they get while you are distracted with stuff that is not true. It's like the con where a door-to-door salesman says you need a security system while his buddy sneaks in the back and steals your stuff. But it's not just the practical effect in terms of policy. When words stop meaning anything, when truth doesn't matter, when people can just lie with abandon, democracy can't work. In our own lives, in our marriages, in our families, if consistently the people we're dealing with can't believe what we say, if our children see that it doesn't matter that you actually accomplish things, all you do is just make stuff up whenever it's expedient, society doesn't work. Democracy does not work. And that's what's happening at the highest levels. And the only check on that behavior is you. The only check on that behavior is you.